Hello everyone, especially to my oral communication instructor and to all my classmates. So, I'm Angenelica Biral and welcome to this simple but informative vlog. So now we're gonna talk about communication. So, what is communication? Communication is something that builds our connection with each other. With good and effective communication, I believe that our society will be a lot more peaceful. Because by good communication comes with good understanding with one another. That leads to good relationships, good leadership, and a lot more good things. But before I tell you about the things that we need to consider in communicating, I will first ask, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word communication? Because for me, when I hear the word communication, I think about talking. But communication is not all about talking, it's also about listening so that we can properly understand each other. Which is very essential in our lives because in this world we need to talk about our feelings, we need to talk about things that we need to consider in work, in school, in your family, and effective communication also helps us to build a relationship with other people. So that is the thing that we should all understand so that we can love learning about communication because it's really important. So now, let's talk about the basics of communication. Just like chemistry, communication also have elements. And here are the 6 elements of communication. The first element of communication is sender or receiver. If we think about communication, some of us may think about talking, but communication is not all about talking. It involves the cycle of sending and receiving the message. The second element is message, which is obviously included in every conversation or communication that we have. Messages should always be clear. For the message to be delivered, channels are needed. Channels are the root of the message. And there are 3 principal channels. The first is verbal, the second is non-verbal, and the third is writing. In communication, there are also struggles. And one of the major struggles are noises. Noises are the disturbing factor that affects communication and can lead to misunderstanding. There are 2 types of noises. The first type of noise is physical noises, which is the noise on our surroundings. And the second is psychological noises, which is the noise in our minds. Feedback. Feedbacks are needed so that we can improve our communication all throughout our conversation. We can also view feedbacks by looking at the body language of our listeners, if they look like they are interested on what we're saying or not. And the last element of communication is the setting. This is where the communication happens. And settings can also affect our communication with each other. If we are in the place that we are comfortable, we can be a lot more participative and can send messages truly and effectively. But when we are uncomfortable on our place or it is noisy, we can have difficulties in communicating. There are also 2 ways of communicating, which is the verbal and non-verbal way of communicating. Verbal is the way of communicating that we use our mouth to speak and use our ears to listen. While non-verbal communication use signs or sign languages so that we can understand each other. The nonverbal way of communicating is something that we also use every day. Like when we use this as a form of saying okay, and it just makes things better. Like the body language when we speak and when we do something that implies a message. Way of communicating also helps us, especially deaf people, so that they can express their feelings even though they can't speak, and for them to understand us. Here are the functions that I've learned. Communication is used to regulate and to control. Communication is also used for motivation, social interaction, to give information, and to express our feelings. How can we improve as a communicator? Well, it's simple. All we have to do is listen, listen, listen. Because as we listen, we will not be impulsive in communicating and we can understand people better. Secondly, we must acknowledge how communication works and the importance of being specific, honest, and genuine to our listeners. Lastly, know our listeners so that we can better know their capacity and what type of people they are, so that we can communicate better with them. Communication is actually basic, something that we do every day. But most of us can communicate well. But knowing the importance of communication, we must practice, learn to communicate, because everything gets better by practice. Again, I'm Angenelica Biral, and thank you for listening.